I'm Aidan Brown, and we are at the Mark Tower in Johannesburg, Sandton, the wealthiest square mile in Africa, and we are joined today by what I consider to be a marketing guru. I'm not sure if he will agree with that. He's quite humble, Stephen Mitchell, and we are here today to speak about The Spell, which, as far as I'm concerned, is one of the most, if not the most exciting book out now on the South African market, or soon to be on the South African market. Book launch is coming up quite shortly, and it will also hopefully be a global bestseller. David Buckham and Robin Wilkinson are actually very prolific writers. They've had a string of bestsellers, and recently a book that was listed for the Sunday Times Literary Awards, and that's called Orthogonal Thinking. I highly recommend that you take a look at that book if you are interested in a dynamic read. Let's talk about the latest book in production, just going into launch now. You have had an inside view of how the sausage is made right from day one. You've now seen all of the books that they've made. Fantastic reading all of them. In particularly, I like the Age of Menace, personally. You have now seen all of them get made. What stands out about this book that is unique in its founding vision, right from day one, from its inception, all the way until now, that is unique, not just in terms of the other books, but in terms of all books?
No, it's been a fascinating journey. Having never been involved in writing a book, to having your CEO come to you and say, "Stephen, I've written a book. You need to help me make it a bestseller." I'm like, "Geez, okay. Well, I haven't even read this book. I don't even know where to start." And we went through the process of finding a publisher. In Burnett Media, who have been amazing to us for a number of books that we've worked on, and we ended up with The End of Money becoming a bestseller. And I think for me it's been a brilliant intellectual journey as well, as someone who loves reading books, to have been seen underneath the hood of how it's all been put. And I really do wish I had a better memory, and I'm sure lots of people who read these books would think the same. I think if you could remember half of the nuggets inside of these books, you would be the smartest person at any dining room table. But I think each of these books have a purpose behind it, and I think that's what makes them all powerful. And for the most of it, that purpose has, in one way or another, attempts to challenge people, to push their perspectives, and to try and get them to understand the world in a slightly different way. And I think I've been privileged then to be able to engage with the authors and really understand these messages that they've been putting out. And I think it's done a lot for me and my own perspective of the world. I think where The Spell in a way differs is the diversity of content and thought within it. You ranging from science to religion to ecos to philosophy, psychology, and it sounds quite daunting when you put it like that all of that's in a book, but by the way that they've created these stories within the book, you're reading it out of enjoyment, and subconsciously you're doing the learning. And I think that's what differentiates it from a lot of other books out there. Where you don't feel, even in the history sections of the book, you don't feel like you're reading a history textbook. You feel like you're almost reading like a beautifully put together non-fiction kind of story about the world. And I think because of those diversity of views and opinions within the book, it really forces you to challenge your own perceptions, and I'm an individual that I'd like to try and understand the meaning of it all, this world, yes, our lives, and as an individual then what our purpose is within that. And even though I think I appreciate that I'll never fully understand that, just by virtue of going through that journey of trying to understand it gives me some kind of fulfillment. And I think I'm better equipped to do that having read this book. I think it's forced the various facets in my brain, being, the left side, the right side, the front side, the back side, wherever else, to challenge my own preconceptions, my own biases and understanding of the world. And I feel like it's given me a range of tools which isn't necessarily outlined in the book. This is the way that you're supposed to think. It's rather given you tools to apply yourself critically, and to do that across all these different facets of the book. And I think that's the real power, is that kind of positive, challenging nature of the book.
In some ways, what I'm hearing from you is that in reading this book, it spurred on almost a personal growth journey for you.
Yes.
I would agree in terms of when I was reading the book, it was impossible for me to go 2 or 3 chapters without having to deeply challenge myself on some fundamental issue.
Yeah.
Having to really look at myself and think about the way that I view the world.
Yes.
And really start to have to consider the new information put before me. And to go back, in the beginning, I thought that it would be impossible to marry all of these ideas together. I even remember giving David Buckham, one of the authors, along with Robin, that kind of feedback, where I read the opening of the book and I couldn't understand how they were going to reconcile all of these things.
Yes.
Were you shocked at just the way that the tapestry was so beautifully woven together into such a neat package?
Yeah, no, I was. And interestingly, I think I gave David similar feedback when I was one of the readers. And I think the structure of the book, because it's not necessarily chronological.
Yes.
And I think in that kind of writing device helps to jog the brain from left to right and to think differently. So I think it's a splendid way to put together a book, but in doing so, it's kind of like, for a writer, they went about it the hard way. But sometimes you got to do it the hard way to do it the right way. And that's certainly what they've done. And in now the final draft of the book, you can certainly see how they've refined that golden thread that runs through the book. And you as a reader, you're now finding that comfort in like going along that journey, even though that it's challenging you, and there are all of these different kind of considerations and thoughts that it pushes on you. You're finding a golden thread in terms of understanding why you're reading these different chapters.
Yeah, I agree with you fully. The book pulls itself together and gets to be an increasingly tight and cohesive package as you journey through the book. I would highly recommend it as a holiday read, simply because it's so data and fact driven, but it reads like an edutainment novel in a way. I almost couldn't put it down. You just want to cycle on to see what the next chapter has to...
No, absolutely. And I don't know if you experienced the same, but when I finally got to that last word, you put the book down and you got to sit in silence for a good 5 minutes afterwards, and you kind of you're like, she's that, like, I enjoyed that so much. I feel like I've learned so many things. I got to sit and process all of this and like work out how to apply it to myself and my beliefs and the way that I see the world. And it's kind of like a bit of like a sugar drop in a way afterwards, and then your brain starts putting all these puzzle pieces together, and when you start having conversations about the book, you start realizing kind of the impact that it's had on you.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. There's just no person that's going to read this book and not find some way to challenge their lives, challenge the way they think, challenge the people around them. This book is an absolute masterpiece in terms of just its sheer depth of information and the way that they bring it down to a single pinpoint with that golden thread. I think the authors have done an exceptionally good job. The book is a thrilling read. It covers many facets of human nature, of globalization, of history. What do you think would be the single most valuable universal idea that comes from this book that you would like to share with the world? If there was one point that you could give to, say, somebody you're trying to convince to read the book, maybe a friend or family member, what would be that message?
Sure, it's a tricky question to answer because there is a lot in this book. But I think if I have to condense it down, the journey through history that this book takes you through, and when it refers to a lot of great thinkers and iconic individuals and amazing thought leaders through the decades and centuries. But what you realize is that a lot of the struggles, the conflicts, the issues that we have in modern day society aren't new. There's a wealth of knowledge in our history that people take for granted. There's so many situations where there are amazing lessons from the past, from the history for us to learn in order for us to apply and move forward in the most positive way. And you just look at, the book touches on the Irish famine. It then goes into the struggles of starvation in Ethiopia. And this is a recurring theme in our world, the poverty, the inequality, and there are a huge amount of lessons, often in what not to do, that we should keep applying. And you just look at modern day society. You have huge amounts of hunger in Somalia. Everyone loves Madagascar because they had this great movie that made it seem like an island paradise, but 70% of their population sits underneath the poverty line, and we should really be doing something about that. And there are wrong ways and right ways to go about it, and there are a whole lot of lessons that you can get in from our history in kind of what does and doesn't work. And I think that can be applied to a lot of other things. The book goes back to ancient Greek philosophy, and some of the struggles that they faced with from a philosophical point of view are questions we're still asking these days. Absolutely. So that for me was one of the real outtakes, is that there is this wealth of knowledge out there from our history, and that as individuals we have to apply ourselves to go and read books like this to better understand that history and our past in order for us to be better human beings going forward.
What I kept experiencing with this book, in a way, I guess is kind of similar to you. So what I had was this zoomed out macro experience. I would have this big holistic view of the world, with a lens of philosophy or politics or economics or whatever it is. And what would happen is I would slowly start zooming in as I was reading the book. And what would eventually happen is I would arrive at a point where I was at a moment of granular personal introspection.
Yes.
And in some ways, it changed how I live my day-to-day lives. There was one or two elements where I went right from the zoomed out, broad picture of the world, and it made me really think about how I live my day-to-day existence. And I was wondering if you experienced the same, and if you had, what about your day-to-day existence has changed as a result of reading this book?
I think something that the book reminded me, and it's through going through all these kind of like historical stories and different opinions, is that it all comes down to people. It's all these massive decisions that have been made, these political statements, these initiatives or endeavors. It's all individuals or groups of individuals who led them, who made them happen, who made good decisions, who made bad decisions. And for me, it it made me think a lot about the behavioral psychology of people. And you go through all these names that everyone knows throughout our history, and you put yourself in their shoes. And as someone like me, who I'm an eternal optimist, I think everyone has the best intentions at heart. It reminds you that we're all flawed as human beings. We all have what they call bounded rationality. We're all inflicted by our own limitations in terms of our ability to understand fully any kind of situation and therefore make the right choice. And our history is littered of people, I believe, who had the best intentions and who have succumbed to their own limitations. And I think it's made me remember that we're in a time where our personal biases are probably heightened more so than any other time. And you think of our confirmation biases and how we search out news and relationships that best support our own opinions. You think about our own shortcomings in terms of how we see the world, and how we are all beholden to our own biases and subjective point of view. And that was a refreshing kind of observation for me, because we deal with individuals every single day, and if you look at them in that light, it helps you to better understand their point of view. It helps you to better put yourself in their shoes, and then you need to turn it around and put that same light on yourself. I'm also a flawed individual. I also have a whole lot of my own biases and shortcomings, and if I can understand the other person's and mine a little bit better, I think it's going to make it easier to have a constructive conversation and to come out with a better outcome.
I think you make a beautifully neat and concise point about the way that the book introduces these really big ideas, but draws you into having to digest them on your own granular level. That's certainly what happened to me, because I have a lot of ideas about the world, and what happens is you kind of lump them into these macro concepts. And it's exactly like you say, the authors have really illustrated how at the end of the day there is a single person sometimes with a single decision-making process, a flawed person in a flawed process, making flawed decisions, but in that moment they may or may not see it, they may or may not have good intentions, but the overwhelming drive to push the reader to really having to look at themselves and how they view the world and their own biases, like you say, I think is actually a spectacular victory on behalf of on part of the writers. They have achieved spectacularly in forcing the reader to take a journey. Rather than just kind of dumping out the information saying this is right, because it is. You have to do the thinking for yourself.
No, absolutely. And I think it's interesting knowing the authors, because you got to understand that they've gone through this same process in order to write the book. They've had to look at themselves, give themselves a hard look in the mirror as well, and try and understand. They in the book they unpack all these variety of narratives that we have in the world, and often these opposing narratives and these different versions of the truth in our history. And it would be all too easy for them to just say, well, this is the way that we think it went down. But I think what they've done is rather provided you the information and assisted you to think critically to come up with your own conclusion. And I think that really is impressive, to be able to get that as an author, to challenge yourself and write with that kind of lens.
Books slap the mind of the reader in a way that other mediums don't. And we're getting down to the point where we are starting to see books take a back seat to certain other kinds of information media, like podcasts, for example, like this. What exactly is the value? Where does the deep value in a book like this really lie versus the more shallow approaches to information exchange that we're seeing at the moment?
So I think it's an interesting one, and particularly as someone in marketing, in communication and content, to think about books. And I personally am a big book lover. Whenever I walk into this room and I see this background that we've got here, you're kind of in awe about the wealth of information there. And I really believe out of all mediums, books are what have given me the greatest insight into our world. So it's really quite sad for me that we are in a society where reading books isn't as valued as it should be. And I think it comes a lot to the psychology that we have at the moment of instant gratification and social media just pushing information onto you and content onto you, and the diminishing of our attention span as a result. That people now they search out the instant information instead of trying to go through a story and understanding kind of like the bigger picture. It's far easier to just have someone tell you what you should think. And I think that books, because they're a longer form, really force you into having a deeper understanding of the content. But it is the world that we live in, and I think, as you know, for us, having been involved in this book, we're having to accommodate individuals who prefer different mediums, and that's why you and I are sitting here and we're having a podcast, and we're going to have snippets on social media, is because we need to take this book as our central hub of information, but how we disseminate it into the general public, we have to have some flexibility in terms of the medium that we use and the style that you use, or else the book can't have that multiplier effect that you'd really want. You can't extend the reach and the awareness of the content if it's just going to sit on a bookshelf in exclusive books.
I couldn't agree more. This book really forces you to take on a huge spectrum of ideas. And what I experienced was that I had to take a 2,000-year and a 2,000-mile journey in order to complete this book and to come to some kind of personal conclusion on it. And with a lot of modern social media stuff, YouTube stuff and things like that, I feel kind of unmoved. I feel like I start in one spot and end in the same spot. You just don't have that growth. It's very difficult to explain, but there was a growth curve for me with this book, a personal growth curve. We're talking about information and the way that information is rapidly changing, and how we exchange information is rapidly changing. We've spoken about the deep value that books still hold, and as far as I'm concerned, will always hold. But let's talk about AI and the introduction of artificial intelligence and the way that artificial intelligence impacts and crafts how we see and deal with information and narratives. What do you think AI is doing to change the landscape? And do you think it negatively or positively reinforces books like this?
So I think it's a fascinating question, and you know, personally for me, I'm now making use of AI a lot in my day-to-day life. Probably 30 to 40 times a day, I'm making use of AI, and I'm finding it very useful in terms of productivity, research. We've even used it for some legal support and content creation, of course, from a marketing perspective. So it's a hugely valuable tool, but every time you have one of these innovations, it's going to shift the landscape. And I think we're still in the midst of that shift. So where it ends up is probably still anyone's guess. But I think in contemplating AI, having read this book, what I was considering is that it's also becoming a form of content distribution, and as you have other mediums, and the book talks about all these opposing narratives in the world and the difficulty to find a single truth. But you have something like AI, which it seems amazing. It seems almost godlike in its ability to provide us information, that you start thinking that it is truth. And I think that's going to be a very scary world when you give it too much benefit of the doubt. And I think a lot of it is going to come down to the way that people utilize it. And I think a lot of people probably don't know how to use it properly, and you're gonna reach this stage where we're all taking it for granted that what we're seeing is the right answer. But whose right answer? Whose version of the truth? Is it Elon Musk's? Is it Sam Altman? And I think that's quite scary, is that you have these big figures controlling it in the background. But as we go through it, I think we're going to become more au fait with the way that we utilize it. And as an example, I've been using it for giving me my news content. And for me, it works brilliantly because I can ask it to investigate a certain news story and provide sources from multiple different publications and synthesize and construct something that I can read quickly and understand from various point of views the story. And I think that's really powerful to have a tool that can do that. But the problem is most people aren't going to do that. They're probably going to utilize it to reinforce their existing opinions and thoughts. So AI is going to be a very interesting journey. Also, in terms of written word, I don't think you can ever have AI create a book like this. It creates an individual with creativity, and it's a different kind of intelligence that it takes to create this book that I think we're miles from ever replicating. So there's still a very, very important place in journalists, in writers, and long-form content that AI just can't give us.
I agree with you, and not only that, but Noam Chomsky goes into that to some extent, where he talks about AI, the limitations of AI being the limitations of us, because the way that AI generates its information, at the end of the day, it all comes from some human experience somewhere. Yes. And in that, I would agree that it would be absolutely impossible for AI to completely write a book like this. You can feel the personality of the authors coming through. And you really feel it in the book. You can feel it in the journey that I talk about. I think that's a very interesting point, and I think it does feed back into the overall structure of this particular book. You could go to any person in the world that can actually read, and you could ask them to read this book, no matter how diverse this person is, from where they are, what creed, what religion, what culture, what country they come from. And I don't believe there is a single person on the planet that could read this book and go through it without personally identifying and emotionally connecting to at least some elements of the overall narrative, which I think is one of the truly remarkable parts about this book. You almost feel at certain points like you've been included by the writers, like you're in the room with them. What exactly do you think it is about this particular book that makes the reader feel so included, even if not on all the parts of the book? Why is it that I felt like I was in the room with the writers at certain moments where I don't normally get this with other books?
It's strange that you say that. I thought I had that just because I knew the writers, but no, you're perfectly right. It's a great observation. But I think it's got it lends itself to the storytelling nature of the book, where you're never being told, you're shown. And I think there's almost like guiding hand that takes you through the book. And even if you disagree with certain parts, or there are chapters which don't sit comfortably with you, I think it's written in such a way that it's a good uncomfortable that the book puts on the reader, and that they're encouraged by this book. It's hard to put your finger on how.
Yes.
But to force yourself to consider these different narratives and these different ways of thinking, and apply them to yourselves. And it's also, as we go back to the original question, it's that diversity of touch points within this book that makes sure that there's something for everyone. So even if you hate philosophy, and there are a couple of chapters in philosophy, the way that those chapters are written, you're going to find something interesting in there. But when you get to the science section or chapters, you're going to be fully invigorated, because that speaks to something that you're passionate about. So there's certainly something for everyone in this book. But I think it's, as we said, that golden thread, and that how it pulls everything together in a way at the end that you feel like you've been given a set of tools from this book, not a bunch of lessons. And I think that's the real power of it.
Oh man, that's just such an amazing point. I love the way that you've summed that up. I would absolutely agree with you that the book, it's not dictative and paternalistic in its nature. It's friendly. It's almost a friendly way of the authors going, hey, walk with us, come journey with us, and let's see where we end up. It wasn't this process whereby they were trying to focus you into a little point. They had a goal where they wanted to move your mind, and they were slowly moving you in that direction. They were almost saying, you're free to think how you want to think, but let's journey together. And for me, that's the way that I saw it, and it lines up exactly with what you're saying. Not told, shown. Not guided, walked with. And I think that's one of the things that is going to make this book so broadly appealing to such a huge cross-section of society. Just very, very articulate. You're a very busy guy. I know that you have to get back to work. Monocle Solutions is obviously highly in demand. But before we go, I'd like to give you one last punch to talk about, in any way that you feel this book is relevant in your life, in your work, in your personal life, in the socio-political or economic realm. One last punch to leave the readers with that you think would be perhaps the most powerful and illuminating thought that you had after going through the journey yourself.
Sure. I think for me, I think the most important thing after this book is having conversations. And I think if you read this book and put it down and forget about it, that the impact of this book is never actually going to be felt. I think it's by sitting down and having conversations like we're having right now, having conversations like with Professor Gumede that we've recently had. I think the book reinvigorated for me this idea of sharing my opinion and hearing other people's opinions and different stories and different takes on the world, and for us to have conversations about it. And you know, if two people have read this book and they sit down and they talk about the content, they're almost given a framework in which to exchange ideas and to exchange hope, I guess, for the progress of humanity. And I think it's a challenge for all of us to be more open and to push ourselves out of our comfort zone and have these kind of conversations. And I think if we do that, we're all going to be better off for it.
It's such a great point. The book certainly pushed me out of my comfort zones, exactly like you had described. You're going to be comfortable with some aspects, and you're going to be uncomfortable with certain others. On a personal note, I found it really challenging to have to deal with the forefront of science, particularly in regards to theoretical physics, which the book gets into, versus religion. And that's, for me, a point of deep introspection in this book. And I think a lot of people will also find themselves in a similar position. But it's truly fascinating to hear what you have to say. And I honestly think that 99% of readers are going to identify with what you have to say in this moment right now. Thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate it. I highly recommend that you go out and read this book. This is truly something special for South Africa right here in this moment. I think that we have a group of some of the best writers and some of the best researchers, some of the best thinkers that have come together to put something truly special together. It's coming out just before the holiday season. Go out, get this book for your friends, your family, your loved ones. This will make an absolutely amazing Christmas dinner conversation. So yeah, thank you very much, Stephen Mitchell.
That's it.
I appreciate it a lot.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
See you soon.